take on some of the bigger issues that we're dealing with as a marketing industry.
The MMA does really groundbreaking research. So whether it's the membership itself, the event itself, or the research, all that really adds up to make us smarter and better marketers.
This isn't just the same stuff that you hear at the conferences. I think it's fairly cutting edge work, and I find I learn something every time.
The MMA is shaping the future of marketing in such a unique way because what they do is they bring together not only marketers, but sales leaders, media partners. They take the whole ecosystem into account.
Welcome everybody to the MMA EMEA webinar. There is no new normal. This is one of a series of webinars that we've been running over the last few years, and hopefully we'll continue to do the same. Today we're talking about data-driven marketing, the difference between buy and buy. Buy, B-U-Y, and buy as in goodbye. To give you some context, the list of issues impacting advertisers right now is ever expanding. There's a fragmented world of emerging channels, endless shoppable touch points, through to the inflation that we've got, the global macro forces that are affecting consumer confidence, and a looming recession. So let's just talk about the R word for a minute. I mean, there is analysis, and an awful lot of analysis about advertising expenditure during previous recessions that suggests that marketers usually overreact in their effort to prepare for recession. Instead, recession periods present really an opportunity for marketers to gain ESOV, excessive share of voice, as we'd call it, and increase the productivity of their media investments. And these research studies have shown that advertising impact increases in times of economic slowdown because the total level of noise from advertising in the media decreases, meaning that the probability of a single advertisement being noticed, observed, and persuading consumers increases actually at a lower cost. So we believe that marketers stand to gain from maintaining their current spend or even increasing it if feasible. But even so, competition at the moment for attention of consumers is fiercer than ever. And a key to an effective omni-channel strategy is translating all the data that's available to marketers into actionable insights. Because data-driven marketing has never been more important than brands to gain share in these particular times. Hence our discussion today, data-driven marketing, the difference between buy and buy. So my name is Chris Babiodi. I'm the MD of the MMA across the EMEA region. The MMA is the global trade body with a mission to shape the future of marketing, bringing together under one big tent membership, marketers, agencies, ad tech, martech, publishers, consultancies, and academia. But enough about me. I'm joined for our discussion today by 3 marketing leaders, and I now ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Caroline Harrison and I work at the bank HSBC in the UK. I head up digital marketing and I manage a number of different brands, so Marks and Spencer's, the HSBC brand, and First Direct. And basically I look after all their digital advertising for the UK.
Hello, I'm Olivia O'Neill. So I'm head of digital and channels, so specifically from a delivery point of view at Marks and Spencer. I specifically work on the clothing and home UK side of the business. I've been here for about 5 years now, and moved recently into this new role where we're working closely with my colleague as well, who heads up the strategy side of digital channels too.
I'm Philippa. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Trade Desk, which is a buy-side platform. So all marketers who are embracing digital marketing or data-driven marketing will use our platform to hopefully find the right audiences for the right price.
Wonderful. Thanks, Philippa, and welcome each and every one of you. Let's get on to it then. So our first question is, let me set the scene on that. So we know that inflation is at a 30-year high, certainly in the UK, and much higher in some other countries. This recession is looming and there's much evidence to not do so, but we will see marketers that will revise their spend downwards. So we've been in a recession before, and we've seen during like the pandemic and even previous recessions, certain companies up their spend and advertising efforts and certain companies bring them down. Just come to mind P&G and sort of Coca-Cola, where P&G ramped theirs up, Coca-Cola did the opposite, and P&G's sales soared while Coca-Cola's sort of dwindled or stalled. So we know brands do best when they maintain media spend. So if I could come to you first, Liv, how and where are you finding reasons for marketing optimism?
Yeah, so to set the scene, during the pandemic, when we first went into COVID, like many brands, a lot of our budget did reduce down as we were trying to understand where were we best to invest, what were our customers doing. We very quickly overnight went from being a predominantly offline channel with our stores to being more online completely. So it was a very different change in how we not only sold to customers, but then also move our customers to how do we deliver to them, how are we best to market to them, are we showing the best product we can, etc. And it was a very big step change for us, I think, as a business. As we moved into the pandemic, my colleague was hired who specifically manages measurement and transformation within the business. And essentially what she was brought in to do is have a look at how are we measuring our channels best, to understanding what is the most efficient way that we can be utilising our channels to our benefit and what incremental gain is there from the marketing spend, essentially. And as you say, we're going through very difficult times still, even a very heavy change period, shall we say. What she basically came in and did was she onboarded our MMM partner. So we work with a partner called Data to Decisions. We've been working with them now for about 1.5 years. And I think it's really put us in a good place as a brand, to be honest, whereby it's first of all supported us to really move away from that last click view and understand channels that you maybe initially would lean on, such as, let's say, paid search. Which channels do you need to then understand what they're driving for you across the board as well, from a more upper funnel channels as well. So I think that there's a lot of optimism that has come off the back of that, especially. So we now, as we said, we're going into the economic climate where their behaviour is going to be changing, especially as we go into the second half of this year. And I think that we're in a position where we've got measurement to understand where should we be investing depending on what we want our customers to be seeing, and knowing what our next steps are to be able to make sure that we're as relevant as possible for that customer and getting the best results as we can from the spend that we're putting into our marketing channels. Whereas if we'd have looked at that before the pandemic, we probably weren't in such a favourable position. And I think that puts us very much in a good place as we move forwards this year, because it means that there's more trust across the business about where your spend is potentially is going, where you should be making sure that you're optimizing further versus pulling back if you are seeing changes to customer behavior potentially. And then also understanding where you have greatest impact, whether that's our online business or also supporting our offline channels as well.
Great. Okay. Sounds good. Caroline, how was your experience? Where's the optimism for HSBC UK?
Well, personally, I'm continually optimistic. I just think,
Great.
I mean, in our world, we're so lucky these days. I mean, I've worked in digital marketing for almost an embarrassingly long time, over 15 years now, and you can measure and track almost everything in the digital world, right? So, in my mind, the reason for optimism is that we should be able to prove what we're driving, the value that it's adding, and the way that I've kind of succeeded at HSBC and have managed to get more budget is by demonstrating that. So similar to you, we've got econometrics, and we use MMM to work out where to put our money. But the key, I think, is speaking in commercial terms to the business. We can't talk in marketing speak to them as they don't. They just look at us and think, God, these guys want more money. I think it's actually equating it to what value is that driving. And I think it's tough, right? Because especially in current environment, cost management is high for us. So there's a delicate balance, but I think it comes down to us to make sure we need to do a really good job of showing where the money's going, what that's driving in the near and long term, and showing what revenue it's driving. So ultimately, it comes back down to data for me. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. Occasionally we get budget cuts, and I've got a real eye for commercials. But I actually think as well we're forced to get more creative when money is more scarce. And I kind of love that. I kind of love the fact that sometimes you rip up the rule book and have to come up with something different. And quite often, from times like that, come absolute gems. So, for example, I've got a lot of type of things like the Gymshark model, where they've built the whole business from referral codes that they gave to influencers. Incredible. So,
right.
I imagine they've got a fairly finite budget in terms of what they spent on influencers, but the business that they've driven off the back of it, incredible. So yeah, it forces us to get more creative too.
Great, that sounds good. Philippa, what about? I mean, you see a lot of business from different sectors, let's say. So, what would you add to that in terms of optimism?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like the innovation that we've seen through the pandemic, which was a bit of a jolt, and even though that wasn't officially a recession, there was a couple of months of people pausing their campaigns and then figuring out where to redirect to still continue to see growth. And I think that's the way we should really think about it for now as well. Being more creative and being more innovative in the channels that you're using. We've definitely seen higher people adopting or trying out new channels that are more data driven. So CTV, people are carving out some either budget that they've paused or want to redirect into something more accountable. CTV's been one of the winners there. Digital out of home, as people have started to get back into that kind of offices and traveling and stuff like that, has seen kind of quite huge growth. The other area that people are trying out is audio. And so that's kind of grown pretty significantly as well. What we're seeing is people being more experimental, and it might be with smaller budgets, but they're trying new things and trying to attach data and ROI to those new channels to prove that their worth. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is where people have tried that, then they come back because they see that those channels are actually more cost effective than some more traditional mediums that they've always been using, but hasn't ever really had a chance to question it or like redivert like budgets previously. So I think we're seeing braver, more experimental, more creative work because of the challenges and budget pressure.
That really resonates. So that's good that we've got the optimism there, because where would we be without it? Well, I suppose we do have some challenges that we're facing. I mean, will marketeers and marketing ever get a break? We've had the pandemic, you've all three sort of referred to. We've now got a war that's happening here. There's legislation coming in various countries and various ways, and living costs that are continue to rise. So amongst the optimism, amongst that sort of backcloth, you guys are still building your brands. And I suppose the question we'd like you to answer, to share with our audience, is that what are the key considerations for brand building in these challenging times? So Caroline, if I come to you, HSBC's brand, how are you keeping it relevant and making it sort of stand out in these challenging times?
Good question. Well, will we ever get a break? I think the answer is no, but I kind of love that because I think it keeps us on our toes, and I think that's the reason why I've stayed doing a very similar job for so flipping long, because as soon as you get good at it, someone changes the rules and you've kind of got to rethink it, I kind of like change, so I love it. In terms of a brand at HSBC, I've got a counterpart that looks after brand marketing, but our objectives are all shared, so I have to almost fall into her slipstream. How do we manage it? For us, it's all about consistency of maintaining that, global brand purpose, the mission, and make sure everything ladders down from it. So she will develop all of the campaigns for Above the Line. I take that, the essence of that really, and then make sure every single campaign that I do ladders up to it, so it reinforces it. Is it easy? No. Are we changing it? We're reviewing it for everything from tone of voice to what we're saying. Is it in the moment? Does it feel right for the nation? And I mean, I don't think we've ever done so many reworks and rethinks given COVID, just in terms of helping customers with financial education, mood of the nation, whether it's Brexit, whether it's things that are going on politically, all sorts. We tend to sort of monitor that extremely closely and try to bring forward, I guess, our international credentials, but in a way that hits the mood of the nation. And I guess ultimately the sweet spot is if you can find something that creates something that is talkable, that fits the mood of the nation, that is incredibly positive, so that you get more bang for your buck, I suppose. So rather than just buying media, it builds something that's bigger. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and I like the way you sort of mentioned that you're in the sort of slipstream of the brand that you've got and how you work closely there. I don't live with M&S, Marks and Spencers. For those not familiar in the audience, how would you say that your brand building, what are you considering in terms of maintaining that position of your brand as you go forward?
We're very similar in the way that we're set up, where brand sits within our marketing department, I sit within our e-com department, managing more so the performance channels. But for brand social sits with me as well. And completely agree with it. It is making sure that firstly, internally, you are as aligned as possible. Do you understand what your end goal needs to be from this creative? What do you want the customer to think when they are seeing that? And then also making sure you're consistent in the way that you're sort of feeding it through to them. So for example, what are you feeding through to them from a brand perspective? And then when you're using the data, are they at that consideration phase? How does the creative then change as you sort of keep to feeding that through and keeping it as relevant as possible, really? And really making sure it's almost a journey for the customer to go through, but how it all pieces together to deliver the end goal you're after. And then also, I guess relating back to the previous question a little, is how are you then measuring the impact that it's got as well? So, are you carrying out brand lift studies? Are there sort of external data sources that you're using to understand what impact has that actually had on how your customer behaves, essentially? Because again, the more different creatives and the more sort of brand building that you have to put together, that's more the cost of the business again. So it's proving all the time why it is worth doing that. And for Marks and Spencer, it's definitely something that we're focusing on, trying to change how our customers view the brand, the type of audiences that we reach, etc. So it's been a massive focus for us over the past year or so. Our more recent brand campaign, which is called Anything But Ordinary, the way that's been sort of fed through is it's consistently feeding through from autumn through to Christmas through to summer. And so it keeps that consistency in mind and hopefully makes it really resonate with the customer for us, and what we stand for, what we sell, good product, etc. is the hope to get from that.
Right. Okay. Philippa, you got comments, things to add there? Anything you're seeing?
Now more than ever, a brand needs to be front of mind for people, because the relationship you have with the customer is just of trust. Even if you aren't in a position where you can get the goods and services you want to your customer in the hand, or in the timing you want to, it's more important than ever to still be there for them and to show that you understand what they're going through. So, I mean, we said it in the last comments that the companies that spend through challenging times are the ones that are still front of mind for people, and that they spend on brand messaging rather than on product pushing. So they'll spend on things that they know are important for their customers. The brands that resonate with their customers based on like kind of what they believe in and the sentiment of what the brand stands for, and making the customer or like making them feel good about buying in this environment from that brand, are the ones that do well after a recession. You can't fix the supply chains that are happening and that are being disrupted at the moment. What you can do is divert your spend to making your customer feel like you've listened to them, and that's the most important thing.
I have to say, just following that, I totally agree. And I mean, during COVID, we switched off almost all our advertising, and quite happily, right? Because we directed everything we got to our contact centre so that we were there answering people's calls, trying to work out how do we support them when things get really tough. And I mean, we'd almost developed like a customer squad that would listen to as many calls as possible, meet with the contact centre first thing in the morning. My team, instead of driving and managing advertising, were reviewing what content we needed to develop off the back of that, and then we were pushing those out through internal channels, through social in the afternoon to try and answer the queries, work out where you can get additional lending from, how you can speak, all that kind of stuff. So incredible. And I think, like you touched on before, incredible what you can do when a pandemic hits. And I mean, I kind of love that, because now I feel like anything is possible, right? Before, it would have taken us 10 man years to deliver some of these things. These days, the expectation is, why can't it be up and running by tomorrow? Which is great, right?
But that's really interesting, because I remember the MMA, we had there's no playbook for this because we hadn't come across it, and you were doing things that maybe hadn't been done before. So I wonder, did many of those things stay? Are you still doing that sort of listening in that sort of way in order to, as you said earlier, to be, to keep relevant to today's consumers' emotions?
Not to that extent, I suppose. I mean, we were literally having daily war rooms, if you like, to just make sure we stayed on it. But calls went through the roof during that time.
Yeah, sure.
And the length of call was significantly longer as well, because people, we were dealing with tricksy issues and trying to help people out. So to some extent, but not fully.
Right. Okay. If I could then just pick up on something else just said in the last few minutes, because if I understood it correctly, that where you both work within HSBC, within M&S, there's a sort of brand team, a separate brand team. And I wonder if you have insight here or could help our audience. A lot of our marketing members have told us there's a lot of sometimes tension within sort of overall marketing, because some of it is like, this is very simplistic, but hopefully you get a sense of it, that performance budgets or maybe digital budgets are maybe easier to sign off, especially when you've got the data and you've got the return on investment and you're comfortable and confident even that you're making the right decisions. Brand budgets are maybe somewhat more difficult to sign off, because it's when's the return and how long and the rest of it. And I don't know and we're doing some work on that, this brand as performance sort of tension, let's say, trying to find out how brand does grow sales, obviously, not just uplift or in purchase intent and other things. So I just wonder if you guys have got a comment on that. Is it cohesion? Is there some tension of brands? Can brand budgets be signed off easily enough, or do you guys get to get more budget because you've got these great data tools to show instant or pretty quick return on investment?
Yeah, I guess from our side, I think if you'd have probably asked us this before the pandemic and before we're maybe in the position we're in at the moment with measurement, it would have probably been more so related to that, where there were certain channels where it was harder to prove the value of them. However, I think that is where it is key, is to have the right measurement that suits your business in place, to be able to understand the impact that it's delivering, or as you're running your activity, running certain measurement or uplift models that may help support where that's how it's delivering. So, for example, we have run geo-lift studies to understand the impact across stores. We run brand lifts, etc. We also have our MMM before that. We just had the NTA side of it. It's actually brought us very much closer together in the way that we work, in the sense that at the end of the day, it's one budget for M&S. We're trying to deliver the best performance we can for the business. Right. And the view that you also need to have is the more that you do fund the upper funnel, the more demand you'll hopefully get in the lower funnel as well in turn. So it's all about how they work together. But I definitely think it's a big education piece within your businesses. It definitely was for ours, to take them on the journey with us about what do these channels do? What are the KPIs of what you're trying to do? There may be some briefs where it is a short-term sale driver that you're trying to look into. But when you're trying to look more at longevity, trying to look at sales that are going to grow, bring in more new customers, etc., that's where you may look at different forms of activity and channels that you may work on. And then also then I think it's also then how they then also feed your own channels as well. How do you eventually make use of the customers that are coming in through your paid and trying to make them more loyal customers, whether that's, you know, through CRM, eventually going more through direct to SEO, etc., and helping the brand resonate further. So I think it's about having the right measurement in place to help deliver your message. Otherwise, I would agree, it is a really difficult message.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I think that segues very nicely into sort of the next part of our discussion here, which is really about interaction with brands and with data. So as you said there, you know, whether it's a new customer you're trying to get, make someone more loyal, and spend more. So there is a data point that says the average consumer interacts with brands like in 20 different channels, whatever those channels may be, and therefore that makes it tough for marketers to really to unify, let's say, that consumer data, get a really good understanding of that individual, given their identities are maybe across different platforms. So I think both of you have said you're trying to pull some of that together within your teams or within your organizations. But again, just as a sort of like insight to our audience, could you give an insight from your businesses as to how your brands sort of deploy consumer data, and what are the tools that you're adopting to really try to unify, unified view of your consumers?
For me, it's all about first-party data. I mean, I'm incredibly privileged and lucky to work at HSBC because we've got an abundance of data. But we've worked really hard to make sure it's all in one place and it's accessible. And then essentially, we've got a customer data platform so that we can essentially target existing groups of customers and then push them out and then buy advertising as a result. And then we've invested heavily in a couple of things, really. One, in making sure we've got the right consents to market to customers via multiple options. So increasingly, we rely less on legitimate interest and more on consent. And my view was that it's black and white. You've either got consent or you haven't. So we've spent a lot of time and energy making sure we ask customers for consent at the right time, for the right things, and that they fully understand what they're signing up for, because I've got no interest in, increasing the numbers only to then spam people and send them with the stuff that they don't want to receive. Ultimately, we just want to make sure we serve the right message at the right time to the right customer and be helpful. And then I guess on the other side of it, in terms of the advertising side, what I've done really is invest heavily in our setup so that we speak wherever possible to the walled gardens, and almost like we build direct pipelines to them so that you can share your data in a very controlled, safe way. Obviously, as a bank, people want to know that their data, their money is incredibly safe with us. So trust is so important. I think we did 1 in 10 mortgages last year, and something like 15% of the UK savings is with HSBC. So we take data incredibly seriously. So working with a third party, sharing anything I don't know if it'd surprise people, but it probably takes us months, if not years, to agree those contracts with them. But we've done that with the likes of Amazon, Meta, Google, and then we're slowly working through the others. What would be incredibly helpful is if some of those platforms were able to help us do it faster, because quite often, it's the same kind of thing that you're trying to do with each of these platforms, but you've got to ask the questions as if that you're starting from scratch every single time. Where do you store your data? How do you send it? How do you dispose of data? What do you use it for? How have you captured consent for your perfect, all of that kind of stuff. And it takes a lot of time. I mean, I employ marketers and I've got a team of about 40. And I'd say 2/3 of the time they're doing marketing and advertising, and the other third they're doing projects at the side of their desk to try and get that sort of stuff set up and running so that it makes our jobs easier in the future.
I think building on that, I think the challenge that most marketeers are facing at the moment is like too much data, not enough, and then figuring out how to use that data in an appropriate way and drive insights from it is difficult. Like you're trying to use your own first party data. You're trying to make sure that you dedupe that so that you're really attracting and talking and targeting new customers in a safe and compliant way. The walled gardens can do that to an extent, but they also have, because they're walled gardens, they have their own a vested interest in their own first party data. We believe the best way to do that is to do it in a safe way, in the same way that where people are setting up agreements within those walled gardens, but doing it in a safe way across the whole of the open internet, which means that you get much more channel options, and you also get much more access to a broader audience. To do that safely, we need to have some sort of unified identifier that everyone buys into. Currently, what we're seeing is a lot of people are asking retail, so people who have got relationships with consumers already, and they